Welcome to Design Talks Now, hosted by Design Pavilion in support of NYC by Design and New York City's international design community. I'm Eileen Shaw, producer of Design Talks and Design Pavilion, New York's public design exhibition held annually in the public plazas of Times Square with the mission to increase public awareness of design thinking and process and projects. This series is our virtual response to the COVID-19 shutdown, our desire to serve our design community with a platform for consistent communication and sharing. We're interested in what's on your mind and what matters to you now. Design is a practice of flux, always observing and bending and shaping with the times. And the world has just drastically changed in many irreversible ways. As a thinking industry, we will identify and meet new needs. We're hereby documenting our experience during this extraordinary time in history. You are contributing to this time capsule, as well as inspiring what will come next. Today, we asked industrial designers Harry Allen and Tucker Viemeister, what are you thinking? And here's their conversation. But first, let me invite you to join Tucker and Harry at the end of their exchange for a live Q&A session. So for now, let's begin.
Hi, I'm Harry Allen of Harry Allen Design. I've been experimenting and pushing the boundaries of design in my studio since 1993. When I started my studio, I was making and selling a line of furniture called Living Systems. And that's when Murray Moss saw my work and asked me to design his store in Soho. My experiments with new and unusual materials led to my inclusion in MoMA's seminal 1995 show, Mutant Materials in Contemporary Design. Originally, I was using these new materials because I just thought they were beautiful. But when I applied a composite plastic to my packaging for Aveda, it really made a difference. Virgin plastic was replaced with post-consumer waste at a very large scale. I started life casting in 2003. It was sort of a rebellion against traditional form-driven design, but also sort of nostalgic. I call this line reality. These products tap into relationships that we already have with the world around us. The next incarnation of reality is called portrait vessels, a line of 3D printed ceramic objects that are all scanned from life. Portrait vessels all have function, but they also commemorate people the same way portraits do. Most of my projects start as studio experiments, but often those ideas work their way into my commercial work. Small decisions like where and how it's made or material choice suddenly have great impact. I continue my material experiments, and I'm still hopeful that material innovation will solve some of our waste problems. I'm also hopeful we can bring more manufacturing back to the US, as having a vibrant manufacturing sector raises awareness about consumption and waste.
Designers have a lot of different jobs, but one job that's different than everybody else's job is to make things look more beautiful. We started Good Grips at Smart Design. This woman came in and she had such bad arthritis that she couldn't bend her fingers at all. And I was like, we got to figure out a way to make her be able to peel potatoes. The idea of universal design, that we could design something that everybody would like. And Good Grips was like the first universal design product. At Rockwell Group, we designed really great like interactive environments where people would have like an immersive experience, but we also made it so that other artists and designers could create things and just plug it into this and have this great medium to use. I overheard this guy talking about this nanotechnology foam that he had, and I thought, hey, this would be good for old people. We can make some kind of underwear so that when they fell over, they wouldn't break their hips. I love reading science fiction because I think we really have to think about what the end game is. When robots and stuff are doing all the work, what are we going to do? People want to make a meaningful contribution to their community, and I think that we have to make sure that we design those kinds of experiences for people.
Hi, Tucker.
Hey, hi, Harry. It's nice to see you.
Likewise. I'm not exactly sure how to kick it off.
Hey, I think you already did. I think you're right. I think this is a super unusual time. First, it was just like climate crisis, then it was like medical crisis, and now it's like social crisis, all like piled up on, and they all seem to be impacting design, right?
I hope, like, I have such a faith in design. Like, I love design, and I have the faith in it and it being force for good in the world, a force for beauty in the world, force for great function in the world. But I feeling right now so impotent as a designer. Like, I don't know how I would ever even approach the social issues, and I'm not medically, adapt to the environmental crisis when we were like where we were. Even that, I feel like we weren't really doing a very good job of solving it. Like it was still this huge problem heading into this.
In this case, it's like there's not a direct line through things. It's like, oh, with the pandemic, so many designers started designing face masks. That was just like one way to help. It's not the only way. Also, I was thinking about the police, and I was thinking, wouldn't it be smart to think about the police as service design? And isn't service design one of the forms of industrial design? In other words, we are happy to take money from banks to help them design the service of their bank, and the police are a much more critical service.
This is a question I wanted to ask you. Sometimes I feel like, oh, you can have all the great ideas in the world as a designer, but if you don't have the client to actually, make the project happen, who cares how good the ideas are, or who cares how good a designer you are? So I was just wondering, like, when you did the Good Grips project, was that self-motivated, or did you have a client over above you asking you for that? Like, that's a great example of actually affecting change in the world. And so I was just thinking about that the other day, like, how did that come about?
That was in the early days of smart design. Before that, we had a time when we were going like, gee, we don't have any work to do. Let's make our own project. And so we said, why don't we design doorknobs? That would be fun. And so we worked for like a month on this doorknob design. Good Grips didn't start as like, hey, let's make a really great company to design stuff for people with disabilities. It started because Sam Farber, who was our client at Smart Design, retired. He sold his company, Copco, and he retired. And then he was bored. He came back to Smart and said, like, let's do a project. We did one project. It was like, didn't go anywhere. His wife, Betsy, was getting arthritis, and maybe we could design a potato peeler that would be more comfortable for her. And that's where it started. And the thing about design is that you always have to have a client. Otherwise, you're just goofing around, I think.
One of the things that I recently saw that I thought was really interesting, I just critted the RISD furniture design, senior crit, and they were forced to go home in March, so they were working from home, and like they were all sort of like working in a vacuum, and some of the work was just just amazing. I was so inspired by it, I have to say. Like, it really gave me hope that design can change things. And these kids, like, they went home, and like because they were in this sort of vacuum and they were on their own, some of the projects got really, really personal and really, really local, and they were like making things in their garage or turning their garage into an installation. Like it was, and it was really great. But then it's like, how, you know, like say one of them had this great idea, like it's how do you roll that out without a client? I mean, it's you're doing to do one environmentally positive table doesn't solve anything. You know, like they're bigger systematic issues that need to be solved. And that's true of all of these problems that are in the world right now. Every product I've ever made takes a year to come out, you know, and then basically the pandemic's over by the time that face shield is in production, unless you're really geared up to make those things happen. So the clients
But
just
that was one of the things. But I think to your RISD students, I think that the pandemic caused people to do stuff in new and maybe better ways. For instance, people were 3D printing those masks in their basements and stuff. And then those students, but faced with new limitations, they came through. And I think if you think of, I think Charles Eames used to say, like, the more restrictions he had, the more creative he was. If you tell someone to just design something to sit on, you're like struggling for months to figure out like what that means, as opposed to when they say like design a stool for a 3-year-old. It's like, oh, I know what to do.
Yeah, no, the more constraints you have, the easier, and actually there's more freedom in it, right? Like
Yeah,
it can only be this, this, and this, then you don't go off in all these other directions.
people do get stymied by seeing like a huge problem, thinking, oh my God, this is such a big problem, I'll never be able to figure it out, how can I help? But it's like when you like break it down and you finally figure out one little thing where you can have an impact, even though it's just a little thing, it has a huge impact. Like you say, with the potato peeler, not only did it create a great potato peeler for people, but it created a whole OXO company that now wins all the design awards. And not only that, it affected all the other companies so they have to make better stuff. So, but we didn't start off to say like, oh my God, there's this huge problem, how are we going to solve it?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe what's going on in the world right now is just like everything is so huge and you're just like daunted. I mean, like I said, I was already feeling daunted by the environmental crisis, how we haven't even made a dent in it. You know, and hopefully there's a lot of stuff that's happening behind the scene with like materials being recycled, but it's not, I sort of know that it's not happening, you know, like that there's still piles of plastic in the ocean, and, you know, so but they're just such huge problems. It's like, where do you start? Like some of the best things I saw was like my sister-in-law was like sewing masks. She sent me a mask, you know, and so now I have a mask to use in the supermarket. Like that, she solved a problem for me very specifically. And maybe actually that's like, there's part of me that's feeling like maybe that's where the world is heading a little bit. Like maybe it becomes more localized and we're all forced into our homes right now. And I'm like, of course, I'm redoing the shelving in my closet, and I'm, like those are like that was those kids too. Like they went home and they did things like there's no more local thing. They don't have to travel to school. It doesn't need to be shipped. They're like making stuff at home, like, and I've been looking at that too, like what can I just like do here and like go put it in a store in town rather than all of this huge production that we do. So that idea of local and even like the face masks and stuff like that, like solving the immediate problem locally is sort of it's sort of an interesting byproduct of these times, I think, or I'm hoping healthy.
I think it is. I think people are really getting, after you're stuck at home for a while, you start to see life in a different way. And I think that's one of the reasons why Black Lives Matter is going to have a much bigger impact, is because people have had time to think about this, and they don't have all their other distractions and stuff. So it's like the pandemic and this culminating at the same time. I hope this is going to be the thing that's going to make the most impact.
Yeah. No, and I'm even thinking, like all of this running around the world, which has been fun and great, but as you're burning up jet fuel to get all around the world to go stay in some fabulous hotel somewhere that's been beautifully designed. Like, I've always sort of thought to myself, well, I sort of want my bathroom to be really nice and, like a hotel bathroom where so that you're not constantly seeking it elsewhere. And so much of my day pre-pandemic was spent getting somewhere. Now I can't go anywhere. So now it's actually, I always thought to myself, like, who are the people who like actually make a cup of tea and sit there and like drink their cup
Yeah.
of tea in their, with their aromatherapy machine that I designed. And now I actually am feeling like I can do those things. Like I have some time. I'm not constantly running around. It's not all burning up fuel, So that,
Or
and
burning up time.
time, fuel, like,
Yeah.
and to your end, like that thought that comes out of that is great. Like these kids that they had a lot of time. I have a lot of time. And that's something that we didn't have before, and is really makes for a better quality of life. It's so painful, but I am hopeful that the world will change in a better way. I mean, I'm really truly hopeful of that. It's just I feel like at the moment I'm a little bit you feel like I love the way you're thinking. Like I listen to you, I go like, oh wow, he's like actually.
Oh, thanks.
So you have a new job?
Yeah. I'm working with Peter Arnell as a regular industrial designer. There's two things that are interesting about that. One is before this, I was working on exhibits and all digital technology and all kinds of things all around industrial design, because I thought it was more dynamic and more exciting to do all that stuff. But now I'm working with Peter as just a regular industrial designer. But Peter's a holistic character. So it's kind of like I was going this way and now I'm going this way, but I'm still going in the same direction, I think.
Interesting. And then what's your project with Satoshi?
Okay, well, I'm working with Satoshi Nakagawa, who's a Japanese guy who is very interested in ecology and micro energy, which I think is really cool. The idea of micro energy is that instead of generating electricity, you tap into the current that's already there. There's electricity going around everywhere, but it's usually like low current or something like that. But if you can now with micro digital stuff, you don't need very much energy to do anything. So if you can just bump it up a little bit, you can use it. But that's one of his other projects. When the pandemic started, he decided that we should do something about it. And what he wanted to do is collect responses to it for his gallery in Chelsea called Fiction Gallery. So, but we quickly realized that nobody's going to you can't go to a show when you're in lockdown. So we're building this website to collect designers, artists, and technology responses to the pandemic. And so what we're going to do is we're asking people to submit their projects. Then we'll put them up on the website. And then when we're allowed to gather again, we're going to have a show at the gallery of all the things and maybe have a popular vote on which things that they like, and then pursue those somehow. Maybe have another show focusing on the best things and evolutions of them and things like that. The first phase is just collecting them so we can, there's a few other projects like this. I think Dezeen has one about masks, and there's a graphic one with posters. We're hoping that this is going to be multiple dimensions, multiple media. It's called Future Life. So we're sort of imagining what, we want people to have a open idea about what the future could be and what they could contribute to it. It's kind of like what, your problem that you don't know what to do. I guess we're not helping that much in telling you what to do, but we're accepting anything you think of.
You sound like you're busy in your isolation.
Yeah, busy, but it's not commercial. I'm teaching at Parsons, and I brought my class to your studio a couple of months ago. The idea was to show the student, let the students meet other designers and get them inspired by what they're doing. But I thought the main takeaway was, I don't know what I'm doing. That was what you told them. It was like, the design business is changing so much.
I mean, I've sort of receded into myself, and for the time being, all of my new projects are just on hold. You know, I'm not. Doesn't feel like a great. I have a Kickstarter all lined up, all ready to go, but I just have been, you know, concerned about timing, and I probably should have just done it. You know, it's just such a strange time for commerce and design, and you know, they're all delightful products, but I'm just not sure they're the focus. You know, like right now, what should the focus be? So I've never known what I've been doing. Like I never have really known what my focus is. And finally, actually, I sort of think last year I sort of figured it out. I'm just going to self-produce some things, shifting my life around, trying to, so almost like creating space for the design in my life, that's what this period has given me during this pandemic.
So in that case, what do you think a designer is supposed to do, and what do you tell young students about what they should do what are they going to do when they graduate?
What I have been doing is just going into myself. Some of the best work that I've ever done, some of the most successful work that I've ever done is self-produced. You make what you have, you find the place to show it. Hopefully someone will walk through and take a look at it and go, wow, that's cool. I'd love to, let me help you with that, you know, and then it comes out commercially through your self generation. And you know, everyone's different. You know, that's the way I've done a lot of my work. And that's the way that I've had success. And in watching these students, I thought, well, that's exactly what they just did. They went home, they created things in that environment. I mean, of course, then you need to take it out, you need to get it out into the world. There's a lot of, you know, ways to do that. Kickstarter is a great one. I mean, we're like watching the job market is just dismal right now. I mean, it's such a scary time for everyone. Congrats on your new job, by the way.
Yeah, well, but I also think that like half of my students weren't thinking about getting a job when they graduated, and the other half were, I think, yeah, we're trying to figure out which studio to go work at, or and I think when we went to college, it was like everybody was looking for a job when they got done. You, on the other hand, didn't do that, right?
No, I did. I had a job. I worked in the cosmetics industry for a couple of years, and then I
Oh
worked
yeah.
for a handler. And I was actually working before I left Pratt. I had a job at Estee Lauder before I left Pratt. But then soon thereafter, I was interested in having my own studio, and I just
Well, I was just thinking that that table that you made as a student project became like your
that
ticket out
became
of there,
really
right?
furniture business. Exactly. Like I just went from one to the next, and that was self-generated, and that was great. Like I almost think like maybe that sort of that level of resourcefulness that's where the action is going to be now. You know, I just don't know who's going to be hiring designers. I have no idea. I'm not really part of that job market. I don't know what it's like right now. Are you hiring? I might need a job. No.
I guess.
Are you
But I think that,
have a whole studio there, or is it going to be just you're like a one man show? Or
yeah, I think he has like 4 or 5 industrial designers working there. I think, maybe there could be more. I think that the industrial design job market has like gone through a cycle where when I first started working, Dave and Stoll and I were like tiny little office trying to get projects at like J.C. Penney, and J.C. Penney had its own in-house design company. They reduced that and they used consultants much more. But then, in the 90s, that kind of corporations were paying way much more money for in-house designers, and the in-house design projects were really fun, like working at Apple or Google or something like that. You got to do really great projects. So the consulting businesses like shrank.
Yeah, I mean,
But now,
it was impossible. It was impossible to get work. I mean, this might actually be good for that, right? As corporations shed employees, maybe there will be more room for consultants. Do you
yeah,
think?
I think that is happening, and maybe like not just consultants like IDEO and stuff, but like tiny consultants like Harry Allen, something like that, individuals. But it's more like we talked about this before, like how the business was going to be more like the movie business, where someone makes a movie, they hire all the people, make the movie, it's a big fun project, and then when the movie's done, everyone goes out and tries to get another job on another movie. That's a fun experience, but it's not like stable. You have to have a
I've always
you
wanted
know
it to be like the restaurant industry. Someone comes in and they say, "I want a lamp," and then you go in the back and you put the lamp together and you give it to them, and they walk out with it like I'm jealous of other industries, like the fashion industry. It's easy to make a garment. You get on these, you sew it. I mean, it's not easy, but it's faster. Like they
right,
pull so many different things. We're like trying to make stuff out of stainless steel and injection molded plastic and like all this
right.
really,
Every day is something different.
yeah, and yeah, exactly, that you have the benefit of sort of using the same production technique over and over and over again.
This is good because I think a lot of not just designers are trying to figure out what they're going to do in the future or what they're going to do now. So I agree with you that it would be great to be a fashion designer because you already know you're going to make a shirt. It's like, okay, what I can put a silk screen on it or whatever. But your lamp store, I thought was a good idea. It reminds me of this in
Lamps.
Holland one time for a design festival. They had this thing where people would bring things that they weren't using at home, and they would bring them into the designers and say, what can you do with this? And they would go, well, look, I could make this lamp into a stool. And then they would go in the back, like you said, and redo it for them.
Part of me that thinks like there's already like this from an environmental standpoint, like there's already so much stuff in the world. Like, shouldn't we
Right.
just be reusing it? I've been one of the things I've been doing in isolation is selling stuff on eBay. I have so much stuff, and then my mother sold her house in New Jersey, and I have more stuff and stuff. So I've just been like taking the best of it and trying to get it someplace new where they want it, because I just don't want all this stuff. It's been an interesting process, like looking at what people value, which is not often what we value at all as designers, and taking lessons away from that. And also this idea that there's already so much stuff in the world, and here we are making more. And I just think what we contribute to the world at this point we need to really think about it, and it needs to be less better stuff. And I've been saying that for a long time, and then a lot of people have been saying that for a long time. But and even in my life, in this isolation in your life, it's like I'm loving getting rid of stuff, and I'm loving adding things that are really, really necessary, so that that life becomes more effectual in a way or something.
That reminds me because this friend of mine, he was like the creative director for Dance. You remember those guys, the Danish design company? And he loves cowboy stuff. And so he started selling cowboy junk on eBay like that. He makes a lot of money selling because he finds stuff in a flea market or the junk store or something, and then he makes up a story about it because he knows how to market things and how to take a picture of it that looks right. He has like customers in Japan and Germany who just are dying for this new cowboy hat because he goes, oh, this cowboy hat is like the one that so and so wore in this movie and blah blah blah. And that he makes up this whole like narrative for it. So
Yeah, I
you
mean, that's
should,
sort of what I've been doing with
yeah. So
really random stuff. Like, I have no slant to it. It's just the all of this, I have all this movement going on in my life right now. So it's created a lot of stuff that I've had to deal with. But it makes me think about all the stuff that we're making and adding to the world, or how could we be going back and reusing in good ways what's already out there. I don't know. It's on my mind also.
Well, I made up this new word called there's there's recycling, where you take something, melt it down and make it into something else. And then there's upcycling, where you make it into something that's better. I have this new one. It's called decycling. It's like, don't even make it to begin with. Like,
Well, that's what I always say that to the kids, and like when I'm creating classes and stuff like that, and it's my cynical nature, but it's like industrial design in its you know core is about making stuff, which is about burning up the world. So it's counter environmentalism. I mean, it keeps people employed, and we're moving forward in the world, but maybe this idea that you make less, it's not about making mass, just lots of stuff to be consumed, to fill the stores, to just fill up your life with lots and lots of stuff that all ends up in the landfill. I just think that that's something to be thought about also, that just the industry that we're in is sort of about burning up the world also. So we should be really cautious about that as we move forward.
I think industrial designers originally, their goal was to make more stuff, that people needed things, that there's a lot of poverty in the world. It was basically about creating cool stuff so people would have that. And I think that times have changed, and so designers can use the same process, the same thinking and stuff, to solve a different set of problems.
What did you call it? Decycling?
Yeah, decycle.
Decycling. Like I've been saying for a long time that the 21st century is going to be about undoing everything that the 20th century did. Like it was like, oh wow, bigger, granted, like it was like building more, blah blah blah, and then now we should be like just thinking about like getting our clean air back, and making less things, and just doing less. It's basically it's the same concept of decycling. And I actually think that one of the weird things is like nothing has changed into the 21st century. Like basically we're still all operating on the same model, and we were actually all really nostalgic for the last century, so much so that people grew handlebar mustaches and were like making pickles, and like all of this sort of retro sort of aesthetic, which of course as a contemporary designer you're like, oh my god, I can't believe everyone wants that. But even that concept of what the future looks like, this idea that it's going to be some utopian unified, that's an old concept. Like actually the better concept of the future is one that incorporates and reuses things, and there's maybe some new stuff, but it's not all new stuff. And it's because then there's a place for when your mother leaves you all of her stuff, you can actually put it on the wall next to you. Like it's this melange, it's this big mix, and it's not this like unified futuristic whole. But so I just think times need to change. Like we need to change our perspective, and actually maybe this is the beginning right now of the 21st century. Like that we have this moment to pause or to rethink and to think about where we're going, and that maybe where we were going in the 20th century wasn't exactly where we're going to go now. Like maybe that's hopeful, right?
I think that is hopeful. And I think you're right. I think if you think about the 20th century, didn't really start until the Depression, kind of. That's when I think it started. So we have like, maybe this century is going to start now instead of like 2YK,
Yeah.
you know.
Like even design, like we're still designing the same way, like and with the same thought pattern. So when you're saying things like we really need to rethink this, I think that's right. Like maybe we need to rethink design altogether. Like maybe it isn't as mass produced, and it's not as global, and some of these things that have been just that, you just take it for granted because that's the way we did it all through the 20th century.
The main thing about design is that you have some ability to change and to make things better.
in the beginning of it, I thought, oh, the minute they come up with the vaccine, everyone's going to go back to the same, in the beginning of the pandemic, everyone's going to go back to the same behavior. I have heard some people go like, oh, all I want to do is go away. I want to get on a plane and go on vacation. I mean, I've heard that thought.
It's like, what is a vacation? Like,
I mean, it's going far away. It's jet fuel. It's, hotel.
Not working.
Not working. I mean, you're not working, right?
Yeah.
But I'm hopeful that it's everyone's been into like this forced period of introspection, right? And that I mean, not everyone has the luxury either. Some people are panicked about their lives, and we see what's going on in the world. So it's like, I say that from a place where I can be introspective, but it would be great if everyone had a moment to look at the world and think a little bit about, shifting the trajectory, maybe a lot, and design too, to be something new.
Well, I would just like to say that I think we're the people who are always trying to think of some new way to make people's lives better. And that demands diversity. It demands that things are going to be different. It demands, other ideas and inclusion and support and all those things. So I think design is intrinsically about trying to make things better for everybody. So I want everyone to be a designer.
There has been traditionally a problem with diversity in the design community, right? I mean, actually, if you look at the schools now, that they're more diverse than they ever were. I mean, it was a bunch of white guys when I was in school, so it's, not exclusively, but pretty much a lot. And that, they were the ones that went off to have the careers and the whole thing. So that has changed a lot. But the other thing about design and this whole social movement that's going on right now that I think is so interesting is that, like when you're making a new thing, when you're designing, one of the things you do is you rip apart what it is that you had, right? Like you rip it apart into all the parts and you look at them. I mean, that's the design process. That's design thinking, right? Like it's one of the steps in design thinking is to like sort of rip it all apart and put all these different things on the table, which in this case would be perspectives, and then rebuild it from the ground up. So I actually think what's going on right now is it's one big step in the process. It's just that when it goes back together again, it needs to be done in a thought. I mean, I don't think it's ever been ripped apart, right? It's never actually been ripped apart. It's just been like, oh, we're going to rip it apart and then go off and do the same thing again, So hopefully in this social change that's going on right now, it actually will get ripped apart and it will get rebuilt into something that works better, that functions better, and that's about incorporating more people. It's one thing I love about the design community is it is hugely inclusive, and the value of that. I mean, we know the value of that, so it's got to be able to change.
When industrial design started, it was just about designing objects. And, it was like, how can we make a better hair dryer or something like that? And then it evolved into the idea of like, hey, it's not just the product, it's the whole experience of drying your hair that includes like shampoo and all that stuff. And then it went from a product to experience. And now I think people are realizing that it's behavior too. It's like the hair dryer causes you to behave in a certain way, and or at least plays a role in your behavior. And people are now seeing that how much how important behavior is, like the designing a mask so that people will wear them so that they will keep you from getting sick is like a change in behavior that design could drive.
I thought your comment in the beginning, I guess we can leave it there towards the end of this idea of redesigning the experience of policing is like that to me, that of this whole conversation, that was the thing that made me the most hopeful about design and of like like, wow, this could actually, like, as designers, we actually could affect change. Or if the world acts as a designer, or the movement acts as a designer, somehow change could really come about. Design thinking is a really great way to affect change. I think that's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, well, I think the politics is not the best way to do that. The design process is much more helpful in analyzing what the issues are, trying to figure out the solutions, like you said, tear it apart, find it, what's working, what's not, how these things are going to work when you put them back together. Because then it's not like, oh, liberals want to do this, or it's like, what do we need to have happen?
The politics has been the problem, right? That should be one of the things that gets ripped out. It just causes such problems. Anyway, it's been such a pleasure. This has been such a nice conversation. I was hoping it would be like this.
Thank you, Tucker and Harry. And thank you all for joining us at Design Talks Now. And for those who will not be joining the Q&A, I bid you to please stay safe, stay smart. Design stands together. See you in a few.
So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to write them our way.
Hey, we got a question. Lewis is wondering, now looking back, I think for me, there's a new sense of trust or distrust I have for others. And as we go through this time, and a new sense of lives that matter. But from my point of view, it seems like everything is different now. The politics, the finances, well, maybe not the finances. It's really weird that the stupid stock market keeps going up no matter how bad things get. And it seems to me that's a sign of the 1% who are fine playing around with their money and not worrying about everybody else. So they're like, it's like a poker game for them, and they don't care if there's like a pandemic going on outside their gates.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you on that. I've been going through such a weird period recently with a lot of like moves and changes in my life. And one of the things that happened was my mother sold her house down on the New Jersey shore. And we were all just amazed that you can find a buyer, but it's in a, sort of a nice enclave down on the Jersey shore. And I was just sort of, and you just realize, wait a second, this is two separate worlds. Like there's such a disconnect, and people want to get out of New York, but I have a feeling that the financial thing is going to change, that the reality of it is going to hit at some point, don't you think?
It seems to me that a lot of people are eager to move out in New York. That's why the real estate market outside of the city is good. I don't know what it's like inside, for renters and things like that.
Also, because of what I've been doing, I'm absolutely amazed at how everything is connected today and with history, and how important design is to living and history. It's amazing that we can still do this in the midst of a pandemic, like just meet like this, and all of that connection is really great. And I'm hoping that will stay beyond the pandemic, this idea that you can connect without actually getting together and have a real sense of community and have real conversations. That part of it, I have to say, has been great. I've been doing, yoga every day, and, you really feel like you're getting together with people and having a yoga class, which is sort of amazing that you can do that in this day and age.
Yeah. And I've spent more time with you in the last month or whatever than I ever spent before.
Yeah, and actually, and the other thing that's interesting about it is I had a phone call today with someone, and it was this really great, in-depth phone call. It was a really good conversation, which I thought was wow, that was very retro to Lewis's comment. Arissa writes, I've always had an internal moral struggle like Harry when it comes to mass production of products. What do you think the future of mass production will be? Tucker?
I would just like to say mass production, we need mass production. How fast you forgot about how we needed all those masks. And, one grandpa sewing one in his kitchen wasn't going to make enough masks for all the hospital workers and everybody. So mass production is still important. The problem with mass production is that it's oftentimes mass producing things that are maybe ecologically harmful or something like that. But mass production is good, and that's why I'm glad I'm an industrial designer, because when I do something good, it gets repeated a lot, amplified by the production. The bad news, like Victor Papanak pointed out, if you screw up, it's a bigger mess than because of the mass production.
Yeah, but also you can make things affordable and they can really get to a lot of people. I mean, I think the promise of industrial design is great. And I'm not so much conflicted about mass production as I am about like you're saying, bad mass production, or just that we've been burning up the world so much. But you have to make things, and people need to be employed making things. That's a good thing, like the economy and the keeping people employed and all, like those are really important parts. But I just think we need to just be really cautious, and we've all had some time to think, so maybe we can, this idea, like Lewis is writing about decluttering and all of those things. And I just think maybe everything should start with that right now, like what's really important, what do we really have to have.
Decluttering is not just throwing away the stuff that you have at home already. It's also, for designers, has to do with, we can pre-declutter. I call it decycling. It's kind of like, if you don't make something to begin with, then you don't need to recycle it or upcycle it or anything. So I think it's like decycle, cuts off the problem at the bud. People are upcycling products by themselves, as you said, designer or not. So I was wondering what you think about the Maker Society and how users are getting more and more involved in product design. Hey, everyone's a designer anyway. So I think it's great for people to feel more empowered to, design and make their own things. I think one of the problems with the Maker Society is kind of like, those are amateurs, and they, it's kind of like, oh, I just got a table saw and look at all the things I made. They haven't evolved to this stage where they're really considering what they're making and how they're making it, and how good how they can improve their design and stuff. But hey, it's only the beginning. So I'm into the Maker Society because we have so many problems in the world. The more people who are helping to solve them, the better.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I think in this moment when everyone's gone into their own lives, I think it's going to prompt a lot of making and addressing one's own issues. And that's a great thing for everyone to be thinking that way. There's one here from Molly Hudson. You both recognize that there's a service design opportunity for cops. Have you thought of any ideas or even service design opportunities for socialization during quarantine?
If you approach it as a design problem and you go, first of all, think about what's the problem. Is the problem arresting people for smoking marijuana? Is that the problem? Or is the problem deeper than that, in that is the problem some people think that smoking marijuana is bad and some people don't, and therefore the ones who think it's bad get to have the police? Is that the idea? There's a lot of users involved here, and I don't mean drug users. I mean like the end user, society in general, who wants to be protected, say, and then there's the actual user who's being a citizen. I think you should even think of the peace officers as users in that scenario too, and you try and figure out what each one of them wants and how we can come to a better society by thinking about it in those terms, instead of like, Well, he was going faster than the speed limit, so we had to stop him. It's a more systemic thinking.
And then society is the client. You have all the different, all the different interested
Right.
parties, deconstruct it, try to put it back together. And then the funny thing, then the second half of that question is about service design opportunities for socialization during quarantine. And I've been thinking a lot about it because I have
an 84-year-old mother that every Sunday I would have her over for dinner. Of course, we haven't been doing that, but now that the weather's gotten nicer, we've attempted it a couple of times outside at a distance, and it's really complicated. Like, we don't know what the parameters are really with the whole pandemic. You don't really know exactly how it's transmitted or who, but I've tried to dissect it a little bit. And actually, I wrote to a friend of mine the other day who's the editor at New York Magazine, and I said, someone needs to do, this is entertaining, not so much service design, but still, it's like, it's all really complicated, like how you serve someone something on a plate, like, do you have to sterilize the plate, like all the questions. And I said to this editor friend of mine, I said, you need to come up with a definitive guide for entertaining during the pandemic. And I think, it's like the problem is no one really knows what the parameters are yet. But I was just thinking, like, whoever nails it in the city, like you're walking around, there's all these restaurants, they're trying to survive, and there probably is a design solution to how we can get restaurants working again, whether they all become takeout or whether there's some distancing solution. You've seen a few of them pop up in design magazines, like the one in Amsterdam where everyone's sitting in a little glass house. There's a bunch of solutions that people have come up with, but I know whoever nails the design solution wins. You're going to have everyone in New York needs to eat, so you get them.
They want to eat.
They want to eat. You get, if someone can figure it out, and that's for almost every industry in New York City right now. If you can figure it out, and they probably need to be temporary solutions, because then we're gonna, like in a year and a half or 2 years, will we need them anymore? But who knows? Maybe whole new industries will spring out of it. Like maybe there will be things like Zoom that comes out of it that you realize, hey, where was this my whole life?
You remember when people first started dying from AIDS, no one knew why. They didn't even know it was a disease. And after people started figuring out it was like gay people were then, and you didn't know, could you talk to them? Could you like hug them? Could you touch them? Could you like, what could you do? And then but then eventually they figured out how it was transmitted, and now everyone wears condoms, and they still have sex. So I hope that with this virus, that it's not going to make us all stay home for the rest of our lives and not have any social interaction, because that would be terrible.
Yeah, but I think we'll figure it out. Yeah, I do remember the early days of the AIDS crisis very vividly, and it is a little bit different though. But they are both behavioral, right? Like it's like you wear the condom, but this is so much more pervasive. But it is, that beginning part of it is so scary. It's like, what is this? But you can even see now that everyone's sort of wearing masks and gloves and out shopping, a little bit again, you sort of realize, oh, I can do this, and it's going to only go from there, I think, and get better. I love this next question. How can the design of physical things be a tool for social change? It's a very interesting question.
How can it not? That's my question. I think that everything that we design or do has some kind of social ramifications, whether it's intentional or not.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Who makes money off of it? Like you work on a product, it's very successful. That money goes somewhere. So does it go to this group or does it go to that group? And someone gets employed out of it, and it's you're using natural resources, and all that stuff affects the way the world works. I was sort of thinking of like the actual object that you design that affects social change. It's very funny because I have this line of products that I'm well known for that's all cast from real life. And last year I designed this it's a coat rack and it's just a fist that comes out of the wall. And I wanted to do it. And now everywhere I see this fist, and I was like, oh, I wish I had done that fist.
I think there's a lot of, I think when you design something that allows people to have different options, or to show that people have choices and stuff, and those things make people more, it's more inclusive, and I think that's what society needs, and I think that's what Henry's getting at with that question, which disappeared, so I can't read it again. We got another. It's not really a question, but Arissa says, "Do the fist."
I'll try. But there's so many good contributions to this. I guess if everyone can see them in chat. But well, the next question up comes from Joyce, our friend in Brazil, and she's asking if we think the world will become more regional or less global through this whole thing. And it's something that I think about a lot, because I've loved the global design world. Like, I've loved the globalization of the world and the fact that everyone's communicating, but I'm not so sure I've loved what it's done to design, just aesthetically. Like, it feels to me like it's become this homogenized aesthetic all around the world. Like, everyone's sort of working in unison, and there aren't as many amazing little pockets of local design happening in the world, where you go like, oh wow, that must be from New Jersey, because they make this, they work in this material in New Jersey, and the people think a certain way in New Jersey or whatever, so you end up with local thought and local process. And that always bummed me out that there was less of that. So I've always been very in favor of things getting more local again. Of course, it's very hard to do it with the economics of the world right now. It's the only thing I agree with Donald Trump about, is that it's a shame that we shipped most of our manufacturing away from the United States for economic reasons. It's, I don't like the way he frames anything, but the reality of that is a bummer for me. It's like, I'd love to be able to go to a factory around the corner and be employing people in my neighborhood and work on things that are relevant here. So I would, I don't know what's going to happen, but if it did become more local, I think maybe it could become more interesting.
Yeah, well, I think design, from my point of view, design is definitely on a global thing. Like, OXO is good for everybody, so why should they only sell them in New York when there's people with arthritis everywhere around the world? So I think when a designer solves a problem and everyone wants it, that, to me, that's the golden ring. That's what I'm shooting for, to be the creator of jeans that everyone in the whole world loves. I mean, that would be great, But and I think that
we were talking about design changing, though, in this 21st century, and maybe it will change away from that. Like, maybe that's a very 20th century idea.
But there's certain things that are good for everyone to have. Like, if someone figures out a cure for cancer, isn't it good for everyone to be able to have access to it? So why not? If I design a beautiful spoon, shouldn't everyone be able to get it? And not like, oh, you live in Canada, you can't have this spoon.
Like, when you're saying OXO good grips, that I understand, that's good for the whole world. Should everyone be wearing the same jeans? I'm not so sure about that. I think that's a sort of a boring world. Like,
they look good.
They're that good.
Yeah.
But I also
look, we're wearing the same shirt.
The other thing that comes off in this conversation all the time is that design is such a huge spectrum, right? So there are very mass-produced ends of industrial design, and then there are less mass-produced ends of industrial design. So maybe there's room for all of it, actually.
Okay, so Dan Formosa asks, should design focus on behavior rather than things? And I think that design already is, because designers are talking about designing experiences rather than designing an object. So, with Good Grips, even though this was a while ago, we were thinking about how to make the experience of peeling a potato fun. And so I guess that we were really designing the behavior, but the power of industrial designers is we actually make things. Here, an example. We actually design things that you can put your hand on, touch, and feel, and that makes any idea much more powerful.
Yeah, I
What?
mean, I love traditional industrial design, the physical thing, but I understand that it taps that, behavior is affected. And I think Henry's sort of talking about the same thing.
He says, is design to change people's moods an opportunity for you? For example, don't laugh. Would you be interested in designing laughing gas canisters to replace tear gas ones? It might be, yeah, why? I think that's not a bad idea. Let's say there's a real riot and you want to disperse it somehow, laughing gas would work just as good as tear gas.
Get everyone
People
hot.
might be laughing so hard they could cry. We're crying, but at least they're, in a good mood, and they'll be just as decapacitated. But see, that only a designer would think of replacing tear gas with laughing gas. There's nobody in the army thinking like that. There's nobody, no one thinking like, hey, this is a good idea. Okay, Joyce is getting upset now. She's writing in all capital letters.
No.
My question is about export, economic crisis after pandemic. The countries must help their national companies and guarantee the work and for their workers and employees.
It's interesting because one of the things when I go to Brazil, Joyce is from Brazil, one of the things when I go down there, you realize that you have this great network of making and stuff down there, something that's really sort of left the United States to a certain extent. Like there are actually still factories making things down there, and not a lot of importing because it's all protected. The economy is protected a little bit or quite a bit, so you don't get like bringing in my products there is always a real problem because they end up being hugely expensive with all the taxes. So they are sort of protectionist already in Brazil. So, and I've always sort of thought, I know protectionism is a bad word in the globalization thing, but then I go down there and there are companies hiring Brazilian companies hiring Brazilian designers making products in Brazil, and they actually really have a nice flavor of Brazil to them. So it's what I'm talking about. They have managed to preserve that a little bit in Brazil. There are going to be some countries that suffer a lot more than others, and then you would think you would want the less damaged countries to come in and help the other ones, so like that's when globalization is sort of positive, right? So
I think that we have to remember that we're all in this together anyway, and so we have to help each other basically survive. Meanwhile, Lori, I think Rosenwald points out when we were talking about designing behavior, she points out, for good or ill, think of computers, iPhones, nothing changed the world more. Maybe since the invention of fire or something like that. But I think that the computers and iPhones have changed the world really fast.
You think about it and you just realize I've been getting rid of a lot of stuff, and it's like I came across a digital camera that felt like it was just yesterday, but of course I haven't used a camera in years now because of the iPhone, and you just sort of go like, oh my God, had the world just revolutionized when that happened, when the iPhone came along. So totally agreed. And it changed behavior, and it's made globally. And so they're, you know, here we are. I think this is actually a good place to sort of wrap this up. I just want to thank everyone for coming to hear us talk and for joining us here. And I want to thank you, Tucker, for doing this conversation with me.
Thank you.
And Eileen Shaw for putting it all together with Design Pavilion, and Armand Brescia for helping with all the technical things. And I'm sure Tucker and I you can find us through our websites and our social media and stuff if you want to hear more of us going on. But
haven't we said enough?
Yeah, I think we covered it. I wish we had solved some stuff, but maybe now we can go off and it's a jumping point for some good to be done.
I always feel better talking to you, Harry.
It's been great, Tucker.